seems, I think somebody calculated it takes about 10 comments before someone says, oh yeah, f you.
Yeah, well, so you're talking about this proclivity of open online discourse to turn into a kind of swarm, and characterized by the presence of, well, I really do think it heats up the whole political environment, because, you alluded to earlier the fact that there's lots of things people won't say in person, partly for legal reasons, but also partly for physical reasons. And both the legal and the physical constraints are removed in the virtualized world. And that does seem to produce an unbelievable flowering of pathological commentary. And then I really do believe that that makes everyone think the world and the people in it are a lot worse than they really are. Because it magnifies the effect of this tiny minority, especially the sadists, It's been so interesting to me to watch your concept of dark triad expand to take into account that positive delight in suffering, because I don't think you can really understand like radical evil by merely making reference to narcissism and instrumental Machiavellianism and even psychopathy. You need pleasure in suffering to really add that last, nail into the coffin, so to speak.
Yeah, one interesting goal we had was to try to find the female sadists on all four of these components. We've males score higher, and even in sadism, we figured there's the mean girls phenomenon. We all have this sense that women can be nasty in different ways, perhaps. And so we tried to develop items, especially with my colleague Erin Buckles at the University of Winnipeg. She's working on this. And so is Tracy Vaillancourt at Ottawa U. They are looking at relational aggression. So women may use different ways, not physical or less physical, and gossiping, for example, spreading lies. There are a few others that exploit the verbal abilities of women and allow them to be nasty to people that they think deserve it. And so those people are working actively on trying to get a measure of sadism that would apply to women even more than to men, because
I wonder if that would involve pleasure in exclusion. It's definitely the case that, well, if you use time out on a child, one of the reasons it works is because it's technically a punishment. It produces something akin to pain, but the pain is essentially social. It's involuntary social isolation. And so if you exclude someone, which is what the mean girl types do, right? That's their primary, this reputation destruction, and exclusion seems to be their particular bailiwick. You see that with female antisocial behavior. And there is a pain associated with that, which is the pain of social rejection. And it's not trivial. Like, it's very, very hard on people. And so you could imagine that positive delight in observing the fruits of social exclusion might be a canonical characteristic of female sadism.
Yeah, that's a good idea to focus on that, because we know that male friendships are more based on common interests. Female friendships are more of a bonding, an emotional bonding, and therefore the exclusion tactic would be much more devastating for women. Good idea.
Yeah. Well, so I studied the development of male and female antisocial behavior for a long time, and it's pretty obvious that female antisocial types, by and large, are less sort of impulsively criminal than males are, which is why there aren't very many females in jail. But that ability to denigrate and to gossip and to destroy reputation is much more characteristic of the female antisocial types, and they can be really, really good at it. And the frightening thing about that, too, to some degree, is that, male aggression of the physical sort doesn't scale worth a damn on social media because you can't use physical aggression on social media. But the female pattern of antisocial behavior, which is reputation destruction and social exclusion, man, that scales like a charm on social media, especially because of what you described as the negative halo effect. You know, and I really noticed this. I should be very resistant to that negative halo effect when I pick out my guests for my podcast, because I have had a lot of guests on my podcast, and now and then I talk to people who've been mobbed, excluded, or had their reputation damaged for one reason or another. You know, and even when I know perfectly well that there's a high probability that they've been lied about and that they've been the target of this kind of malicious gossip, there's still a strong proclivity in me that I have to fight to overcome, not to assume something like, well, where there's smoke, there's fire. You know, and you don't have to sully someone's reputation much before you raise the cost that other people need to bear to interact with them, right? I mean, we all have, in principle, thousands of people we could interact with. And so we're always looking for a reason, in some sense, not to interact with people. And if a terrible rumor has spread about someone, well, the cost to me to avoiding that person can be very, very low. But the cost to that person, if everyone avoids them, is unbelievably high.
Yeah, most people care about how a person treats them specifically, and they can overlook rumors often because the other person has treated them personally well. So that's a dynamic that works in the other direction to cut down on the negative effect of rumors and gossip, that sort of thing.
Right, assuming that you actually have that personal relationship. You know, one of the things I've also seen as a consequence of virtualization, you know, if I'm working with people virtually, and so we haven't established that kind of personal relationship, if any issue comes up that's negative, it seems to have a larger effect than it would if we had established you know, a long-term, more personal face-to-face interaction. So as long as things are going smoothly, the virtual interaction seems to go well, but it's really easy for anything negative to be magnified. And I think it's partly because you don't have that buffer that you just described, which is maybe something like the evidence of repeated interactions face-to-face, evidence of repeated acts of kindness and so forth, so that you have that as a data body to offset the negative event against.
Yeah, right on all of those points.